Alright guys, in today's video, working on this GE Profile front-loading washing machine. And the problem we've got on here is if we come all the way down near the bottom, she's got a leak after a cycle. Try not to wash this out with the flashlight, but you can see the water just slowly dripping right there. And with this corrosion, it's probably been a minor leak for a long time, but it finally got to the point where it's noticeable. And so you can see we've got this water going on inside here. So what we want to do is get access to try and see where this is coming from. So we're going to take a look at the service manual for this unit and see how we can do that. So if you guys watch my videos, you know I'm a real big proponent of OEM service information, and the washing machine is no different. This is the service manual for this particular GE Profile front loader washer, and there's the model number. There's a bunch of suffixes for all the different colors, and what I've already looked in here is this lower panel here, which they call the service panel. Looks simple enough. There's 3 screws that we just saw a couple right there. We should just be able to take these 3 Phillips screws off and pull this down. I assume it's kind of slotted in, but let's go ahead and remove that so we can peer inside and see where this leak is coming from. Just as I get started here, guys, I just wanted to show you, here's just another shot. It's just steadily accumulating water right here on this corner. You can see there's a drop right there. All right, we'll go for this center one first because he's not rusty, and that'll give us an idea if we can get this off with a screwdriver or we have to get a socket on the hex head here. Yeah, I cannot even get this guy to barely move, and he's not even rusty. So we're probably going to be in for a fight on the one where the water is actually corroding it. This one's actually rusty behind. No telling how long this problem has slowly crept up here. Now see, this one is so corroded, I don't know if we can get a bite. Yeah, I'm going to have to get a socket on this rusty one here because the Phillips portion of the bolt is just all rotted out. All right, we're going to try a 7mm and see if we can get this rusty fastener out of here. If not, I'm going to have to escalate. Yep, nope. This guy here is even all corroded on the outside. Let me see about the one on this corner. It's like working on cars, guys. Everything's rusty. Yep, this one also. The heads on both of these bolts are rounded off. So I'm going to have to escalate and get kind of like a bolt extractor. All right, guys, the first thing I tried was this Craftsman screw extractor, and that didn't work. It actually made the problem, I guess I would say, a little worse because it gouged out what few threads were left, but it did catch it. Let's try to show you again if I could catch it one more time. Now I can't get it. It turned it just a hair. This might work if it wasn't so rusty. What I switched to was a pair of long nose vice grips. And this, you can see we're actually getting enough of a grip to get this rusty screw off of here. It's going to take us a while though, but you get the technique. So I'm not going to bore you guys with this, but we're going to have to go down clip by clip, one turn at a time to get this off. So I'll show you this one and then I'll go grab the other one off camera. But yeah, this is this problem has obviously been going on for a while. This thing can bite in enough to get it the rest of the way, maybe. All right. Yeah, that is very, very corroded. All right, let's see if we can go get the other one, the last one. All right, this one required some persuasion with a larger jawed vice grip first, and then we could get the long nose guy in here. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to finish it off with him, and then we can get this panel off and see what's going on. All right. Yep, that one's pretty bad too. All right, so according to the service manual, this should just slide down, and this should give us some visibility into what's going on. Now this whole panel might be rusted on. Yep, there's a ton of rust falling down. Normally, I think this would just slide off for you, but because of this corrosion problem, we're getting a lot of resistance. There she goes. All right. Yeah, we've had a water problem going on this unit, it looks like, for a while. So, significant corrosion around here. And definitely a lot of corrosion right here. So what I want to do is I want to get a camera and see if I can peer inside here and look behind this panel, because this particular panel here, I don't immediately see any fasteners. Looks like it's riveted. So let me see if I can peer behind here and we can try to see where this water is coming from. All right, let's take a look behind this panel and see what we see down here on the camera. So right there, I can see water. I don't know if you guys can see it right there, right? But you can see that's a puddle of water sitting right there. Come in from this other side. Past this drain pump piece. There's our corrosion. Right there in that corner right there. All right, so this water, where is it coming from? And actually, we don't even need this camera, guys. If I take this flashlight and put it right back here, you guys can see that. That's water sitting right up here. All right, so this water isn't coming from the drain pump like I would have thought from the location of the leak. This water is coming from above and dripping down and accumulating on this bottom area. Now you can see we got a lot of wiring down here, and some of this wiring over here is just sitting in water. We're lucky that there's no problem with any of the insulation, but let's go ahead and de-energize the unit and let's take the top cover off. All right, real quick again in the service manual, for that top panel to come off, there's 3 Phillips head screws on the back that they show you in the picture, and what they tell you is that you need to remove these screws and then slide the top to the rear 1 inch and then it'll come off. So let's give that a shot. All right, let's work the plug off so that we don't have any kind of an electrical hazard. And then if I show you guys around here in the back, because I'm not going to be able to film doing this, you can see the top cover. There's 1, 2, 3 more of these same type of 7mm with a Phillips core bolt. And we're going to remove all 3 of these, and there's no corrosion up here, so these should come off fairly easily. And once we pull those off, I'll bring you back, but this top cover just slides back towards the power outlet and lifts off the unit. All right, all three of these screws are out, and we're going to just push them over to the dryer unit for now. And then this top cover, like I was telling you, the service manual indicates that with these screws out, it should just slide off, slide backwards rather, and then you can lift it off. And it's exactly the way it says. All right, we're probably going to have to get a stool, but let's just see what we've got. Now again, we've unplugged everything. This is where the water comes in, and on this model, this is what the water valve looks like. And I don't have to go any further. The water is coming out of this valve. You just see it drip right down there. Now I'm just going to double check. I don't see any sign of water leaking, but you can, if you watch this thing, you can actually just see it. I don't see any water leaking from any of these hoses that go into the dispenser assembly. This hose that goes up to the front area that just sprays right behind the door where the drum is, I don't see any leaking from there either. So before we do anything else, we're going to have to replace this guy. So to replace this guy, I'm going to shut the water off in the back, and then I'm going to get a pail here so we can disconnect. If I pull the camera over a little bit, you see what I'm talking about here, right? So zoom out just a hair. So this guy here is right where your water lines come in. And then in this particular setup, they go down to these valves here. So I'm going to shut these water valves off. That's going to take the pressure off. And then I'm going to disconnect these two braided hoses. And then we're going to see what the service manual says about removing this water valve. All right, to get this water valve out after we've removed the top panel, there's just some electrical connections that they talk about here in the manual, and then there's a hose that comes out of it that feeds into the dispenser assembly. So we can see here hot water has the black leads, cold water has the kind of clear, natural colored plastic leads, and then there's a hose clamp holding the outlet hose. So one hose clamp and looks like one screw over here on the back side. So let's take a look at that. There's a picture of that screw. And then it's embossed in the metal with H and C for hot and cold, so you can't screw up your connections. So let's go ahead and get this off. All right, guys, I'm not going to be able to film the whole thing here, and it's not any real big deal, but I'm going to take a towel now that we got the water shut off, and I'm going to come back behind here with a crescent wrench. You can also use an appropriately sized wrench, and we're just going to work these hoses off. And again, make absolutely sure that you've shut the water off so that you don't have a huge mess. If you shut the water off, the only mess you're going to have is just the residual water that's in the lines. But you got to take these two water lines off before we can replace this valve assembly. Great, no mess, just a little bit of water. Give me back that wrench. Just a little bit of water in the hose. So we'll do this to both of them, and we'll just turn them over and drain them into a bucket, and then we can proceed to removing this actual guy. All right, let's remove this valve assembly. So if we go back around the back, once again, the same type of 7mm with a Phillips insert screw is what holds this on. There's just one. So we'll take this out. Again, this is not corroded, but now that should let us work this out. It's kind of like slides into this little bracket here. And again, I'll do the same reminder. Make sure that you've got this unplugged. And I'm going to have to grab a towel because there's a little bit of residual water in the back of this guy. All right. That'll stop the residual water problem, at least where it's not leaking. So the only thing we have to do is get a pair of pliers to release this hose clamp and take this hose off, and I'll show you what we're replacing this with. All right, it turns out the part number to replace this guy for this particular washer is a GE, if I can get this flattened out for you, a GE WH13X 10023. GE makes a lot of different washers, and they all have a kind of similar part on them, but there are many different numbers and types. This is the type that we want for this one, right? So we're just going to make a visual inspection to make sure it looks the same. The part number on the back is not the same as what's on the bag because that's for these solenoids. So that's the first thing we're going to do is we're going to transfer these electrical connections so we don't get them wrong over to the new one. So these two black ones go on the outside edge, and then we'll do the two clear ones. And then we'll move the pipe. All right, and then for the pipe, like I mentioned, we've got this little hose clamp here. We're just going to give him a squeeze and move him back. Hopefully this will cooperate without any damage. My advice is always to give a twist on things like this to break any adhesion that might be there, and then as you pull, just kind of screw it out. It's the best shot at salvaging the original pipe without having to replace it. And then for reinstalling it, you can just slide it on in the usual manner. All right, we'll get this guy remounted so that the hose can twist to where it's happy without any kinks. And then we'll take it out and we'll move this clamp back to where it needs to be. Use the witness marks to try to get it back in the same spot, just to ensure that you don't get a leak on the hose just from that. All right. What do we do with our little screw? It fastens this guy. Make sure it's flush. I'm going to block your guys' view for a second here while I fish around for this hole for this guy. All right, with this tightened in, there's no torque value specified. Just make it snug because it's going into plastic. Now let's do the hoses. All right, we're going to replace the hoses with the WX14X 10005 from GE. These are stainless steel braided hoses. If you look in the owner's manual for the unit, it tells you these hoses should be replaced every few years. And when we're doing a service like this, we'll just go ahead and proactively replace them now. So I'm not going to bore you with installing a couple of hoses, but we'll put these in, and then I'll show you how I would recommend you go about cleaning up the spill that this failed part made down below to avoid any kind of electrical issues. All right, so we're just going to tighten up this last hose, and then we'll turn the water back on, and we'll check for leaks, both at both ends of the hose, as well as the new valve itself. All right, we shouldn't expect to have any leaks with a brand new valve assembly. If it was going to leak anywhere, it would be where we reattach this hose. Now, there's no water coming out yet, but if there was a leak at the housing of the solenoids, just having the water pressure turned on, we would see that, like we saw with the one that had failed. We'll have to get a cycle going for this solenoid, either hot or cold, to let water through. So we'll have to leave the top off, get a cycle started to make sure it's not leaking at this hose. So now let's go about cleaning up what we had going on down below where this has been dripping for quite some time. All right, before we go down below, wherever you see that water might have splashed and spilt during this repair, just make sure you get it all cleaned up so it doesn't throw you off to think that you have a leak somewhere. And then you guys, if you guys noticed, there was some kind of staining from the dispenser here. I cleaned that up as well. All right. We don't want to operate things. We zoom in here, right? We don't want to operate this with this much water sitting in here. So we're going to want to get some paper towels and maybe even some sponges and soak up enough of this standing water until we get it dry. So just soaking this up and then squeezing it out into a drain pan until we can get to a point where things can air dry. So that's how I would recommend you do this. It's going to be a slow process, but you can't operate this with this water standing here. It's a shock hazard, as well as if anything was to short out, more damage, and at that point this would not be worth repairing given its age. All right, guys, we've given this a full 36 hours to dry out in the front. We're going to go ahead and re-energize this. We're going to run a couple of cycles. We're going to want to exercise the hot and the cold to make sure neither of these solenoids is leaking, and that'll give us an opportunity to check these hoses. Now, with this energized, be extra careful. It is an electrical hazard, but we're going to leave the top panel off until we verified that the new part is not leaking, as well as that we have a good seal at this outlet hose. And if we pan back down to the front where the service panel was, you can see we've wire brushed all of the loose scale and flaky rust off, got it all vacuumed and cleaned up, and you can see it's nice and dry now. It's got a rough finish because of this corrosion, but it's just cosmetic. There's no there's no perforation, and there's no rust through, so this is a purely cosmetic type water damage. If this piece here was removable, I would have elected to pull it off and maybe refinish it and paint it, but it's riveted on. It's kind of like a built-in kind of rivet. Pushes in and expands and holds it into this other panel when they built the cabinet. So we can't easily remove this, and it'll be fine for the life that's left on this unit. All right, guys, it's doing the water fill portion of the cycle right now. Don't see anything dripping. If we kind of zoom in back there on the hose, looks good so far. Like I said, we'll go ahead and we'll let it run through this first load, which will be hot. Then we'll run through a cold load, and if that's not leaking, then we can go ahead and put the covers back on, and I'll show you what we did with the rusty fasteners. All right, to get the service panel back in, my advice is, get it positioned and then try to lift the washer from here, and it should snap back in. If you've done it correctly, and we zoom in here, what you'll be able to see is the hole for the screws will be very visible behind the metal. Before I go this piece, I wanted to show you what we did to try and clean these stains up. So if you saw on the service panel, there was a lot of rust stains on top of the white paint. CLR, I found, was the way to get that off, along with a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. So using that, got this pretty clean, as you can see. I didn't get too aggressive because we already have the paint kind of chipping, and I don't want to get more rust because this piece was okay. It was just the chassis piece that had the problem. All right, to replace those corroded fasteners, we've got 3 GE WH02X 10219. These are the replacement screws. GE sends them already painted, so you don't need to have any touch-up paint necessarily to do this. Now, after we use the CLR, we do see that we had some chip paint, and so fixing the chip paint, like we can see, the center's okay. There's a little bit of chipping over here. We'll touch that up with some Rust-Oleum touch-up paint. I'll send you a part number for that, along with all these parts in the video description. If after lifting up on this, you still don't see the hole to line up, you can use an awl, and you can use that to help get this centered so that you can get these screws in here. There is no specific torque value given in the GE service manual for these. So we're just going to put them in there until they're snug. Now, because of the corrosion, this one's a little hard to get in because of the corrosion. Just got to push in really hard to get that guy in there, and then we'll be able to touch him up with some paint. I'll go ahead and put these other two in off camera. You guys don't need to care to see that. The last two things I'm going to show you is, this is a blow up from the parts diagram. I just want to show you some of the parts that were involved here, right? So we replaced this water valve here. The part that we're doing, the part that we were talking about earlier that was on this bottom of the chassis, which is where the water was collecting. You could replace these corner pieces and those screws if you have this problem and it's more rusty. Just pointing that out, but you can't necessarily replace the bottom of the chassis because it's a discontinued part. And then the other part that you might need that we didn't need today, but the hose clamp and the hose coming from the outlet of the water valve, I'll include those in the description as well. We didn't have any leaks, so we were able to reuse what's there. But if you find any leaks on these pieces, these parts, I'll put the hose number down there in case you have a different outcome. The last thing I'll point out on this model is there is a recall from GE a few years ago, and I'll put that information in the description because if you're in here trying to keep this going, you might as well make sure that the recall was performed on it. It's free, and GE will still come out at the time of this video and apply that, even though I think that recall was almost 10 years ago. If this helps you get your GE washer going again, I appreciate you taking the time to pay it forward and hit that like button. If you got questions or comments about what we did, go ahead and put them below and I'll try to help. And as always, thanks for watching.